I'm going to quit my job. And I suggest you quit your job. Then go and find another job, so you can quit that job.
Trying Harder, episode 2. Welcome to it, and thank you for joining. Quit your job, then go get another job so you can quit that job. Just quit jobs hard. Unless you have a lovely job that's fulfilling and that brings you joy in your soul, in which case protect and treasure and nurture your job. Up to you. But rethink your job. That is brought to you courtesy of the Shabs, wonderful Cape Town-based South African band. Please do go check them out. SHABS, link in the description. Link will be at the end of the video. They kindly lent me their song, which is one of my favorite songs, especially not like in general, because I don't like it when people are like, for a South African song, that's really good, or this is one of my favorite South African bands. But you know, they are one of my favorite South African musical acts, and I really love them, and I appreciate that they loaned me their song. So please do check them out. Also, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I won't go in all the details again. They hit some really difficult financial trouble as a result of this COVID thing and a tour that they'd had planned, and they are, check them out, look them up on Facebook. You'll see a crowdfunding project where you can get some really great merch, vinyls, CDs, artwork, limited edition stuff, all kinds of cool packages from them. And also check them out on Facebook because they did a 21-day song a day music challenge and completed it. They wrote and launched a new song every day for 21 days, and they're outstanding. I have my favorites, but they're all very good. So check them out. Check out the Shabs. I also want to start by thanking all the people that I keep forgetting to thank that need to be thanked for this thing being possible. Although I have mentioned him before, I'd like to start with my buddy Jonathan Josh Clark. He's been helping me every step of the way, from setting up the equipment, showing me how to use it, teaching me some of the basics, to literally sitting with me on a TeamViewer WhatsApp call situation while we edit these episodes, and I'm learning a great deal, and it would have frustrated me trying to figure this stuff out to the point where I would have just left it otherwise, or it would look like ass filmed on a phone. And I would also like to thank my buddy Greg Russell, my bestie Gump, Greg Russell, who has helped me from the start with my logo design and the CI and all the cool things that make me look like I know what I'm doing. And my buddy Ryan Jonathan, who helped initially with the animated intro and outro, along with Josh. They made that really cool. So thank you guys. So broadly speaking, the topic of this particular episode is the truth. And this is a topic that for me has become, like, over the years, not only very important, but also like layer upon layer of Inception-like philosophy and mind-bending contradictions, and, you know, like, what even is the truth? And I'm going to try to talk about my approach to it, my beliefs around it, and some of the complexities surrounding the concept of truth and how it applies to your life, and how, for me, it's like the ultimate barometer and North Star / compass for trying to live some sort of moral code outside of any prescribed moral code, i.e. like a religious code, or, you know, I think we all kind of responsible for figuring out our own moral guidelines and rules and compass, and trying to be a good person if possible. And that, you know, does that even mean? You know, when are you being good? When are you being self-serving? Is it good to be self-serving? Maybe you should be. All of that. Everything that I will talk about going forward and have talked about in the past regarding the concepts of morality. And again, a little disclaimer, and I know those of you who are now on your 3rd episode of this, and thank you to all of you that have watched everything so far, or even watched bits of the previous 2 episodes. When I talk about what people should do and what people must do, and this is not good and that is good, I'm not pontificating from the position of someone that knows and has everything figured out. I'm talking almost always, unless otherwise specified, when I say we do this or you do that, I'm including myself in the royal we. You know, so this is me trying to figure life out and doing it out loud, and hoping you guys enjoy coming along for the ride. So I think that we should try to have a moral code and stick to it. not one that's imported onto you and inflicted upon you, that you have to just adopt and believe it's right, even if it doesn't make sense or doesn't apply to your life or is thousands of years old with many generations of broken telephone, politically motivated changes. You shouldn't, even if you do ascribe to a pre-packaged moral code, and cool, I'm not here to say whether people should or shouldn't be religious, any of that, but even if some of them come from philosophy and some of them come from Eastern and Western belief systems, even if you do ascribe to one that you found elsewhere and have now put into your life, you should question it. And you should evaluate it, and we should think about what the rules are and what they mean and whether they're doing more harm than good. And a lot of that, for me, centers around the principle of truth. So I'll get into that right now. But first, I want to thank you guys as well, before I forget again to keep thanking people for the support. The YouTube channel's on a 220 odd subscribers. The first episode, the 0th episode, has got over 1,000 views. The second one is probably up to about half that by now, and it's hardly an overwhelming success in terms of the grand scheme of podcasts. But considering my goals and what I was hoping to achieve with this, it's really off to a brilliant start. And everybody that has liked the Facebook page, that's facebook.com/tryingharderpodcast. I'll be sharing episodes there, but I'll also be posting little bits of content, and I'll also be setting up an Instagram channel for the page soon. In the meantime, you can follow me if you'd like to at Gord Laws. All of you that have listened to the whole thing, or even just listened to bits of them and have messaged me with encouragement and have subscribed and set alerts and clicked the like button. I know that's a mission. I mean, I don't want to be nagging people to click the like button, but if you do, it does help with search results and that kind of stuff. So thank you to all of you. The messages, the comments, all of that kind of stuff that like just reminds me that this is a worthwhile project, and not to forget, because people actually do give a shit. So thanks again. Also, as I've mentioned before, you can catch me on Wednesday mornings on the Gareth Cliff Show. I get about 80-90% of those in. I miss the occasional one, but damn near every Wednesday morning I'm on there. We are still continuing to broadcast via video chat platforms through isolation and that. So check out the Wednesday morning shows when you'll find me. You go to cliffcentral.com, look for the menu item GCS, that's the Gareth Cliff Show, and you can find every episode going back all the way to antiquity. I talk a bit more shit there, and it's a little bit more lighthearted, and I'll be prone to kind of take the piss a bit more. And not that this podcast is without humor, but I probably, if you want to hear me talking crap, which a lot of people kind of think are what they sign up for, then you get a bit more of that frivolity over there. And plus, Gareth and the team are just awesome, and it's a really good time. So about the truth, I want to also mention that there was one small factual error in the previous episode's epic story time, which, as I mentioned, is going to be a feature in every episode. I'm going to tell a true story, either with the names and places changed to protect the guilty, or if it's only me that can be shamed by it, with the details exactly accurate. And I started with my favorite name drop story and my biggest sort of brag story of all time, which is how I hung out with Lars from Metallica and got to meet Metallica. And it's a cool story. Even if you go back to the previous episode and just watch the last 6 or 7 minutes, you'll hear the story. There was one factual inaccuracy which came out purely as a kind of error, and I only purely as an innocent mistake. When I said that I reunited with Lars in 2013 and had to explain to him that I'd lost a bunch of weight at that stage, and then he recognized me, he didn't go Gordy, he went Captain Beer, that guy. And so I tried to put a title on the video to explain that actually he said Captain Beer and not Gordy. Did still remember me though. But it turns out that those captions that you add on Facebook videos after the fact only come up if you subtitle, if a viewer has enabled subtitles. So a small thing, but given the topic of today's episode and the fact that it's important to me to be accurate, still claiming all of the points for that story. So the truth, right? I realized somewhere in my 20s that I lied a lot. Like, I also realized somewhere toward the end of my 20s that, like, as a science enthusiast / agnostic. I don't really have like a prescribed moral code. I kind of know that I know the difference between good and bad in me. I have that voice, that feeling that comes from sort of your soul, if there's such a thing exists, when I know that I've done something bad and it really bothers me, or I know that I've done something good and it makes me feel good. But I don't have a set of rules or commandments that I live by, and I'm not able to buy anybody else's, at least not in their entirety and without question. So I needed some sort of diet soda, bad for you on many levels, but it could be worse. It could be sugary packed soda. Please, no storm of comments about how phenylalanine and that stuff is bad for you. I don't care. Excuse me. And I thought to myself, like, I lie all throughout my day. And this has been a long time. So it's been with me a long time, this kind of philosophy, for lack of a better word. But I have evolved it and given it a great deal of thought and spent a lot of time kind of meditating and pondering on it and changing my views on what everything means, because the truth is a fluid thing. It's not a finite, hard concept. So I kind of went like, I make an excuse anytime I don't want to do anything. I just make up a story. And, also kind of growing up as a cisgender boy person with largely cisgender boy friends, as a child, you kind of inclined to brag and pretend that you've done something, like you'll say like, yeah, I had a fight and I won, or there was this altercation and I said this and this and this to the person, or, I went out and like I kissed a really pretty girl, and, and no, not like in a way of like trying to make yourself a hero at the expense of some poor individual's reputation. It's more just like tall tales of bloke success. And it's kind of natural. It's like this one-upping process that you do to kind of protect and insulate yourself socially. And when you're a kid, it's a pretty innocent thing, although you do get those people. Me and my friends in high school and towards and throughout varsity, we had a friend who's moved overseas subsequently, and I won't say his name, although I'd like to, who just everything he said was total bullshit. In fact, I know two people like that, both that I knew from kind of high school and the years that followed high school, and where just you almost had to accept them for it, And I've got also another person that I know who my relationship with is long and storied and difficult, who always has excuses for stuff, and like it's just never true. But these, in the case of the former two examples that I mentioned from school and high school, it's kind of more just tall tales for the sake of social validation. Similarly, you lie when you decide you're not going to do an assignment or your homework, and you prepare a lie, or you're going to let somebody down or prepare a lie, or you're going to tell your parents, you're going to go do one thing at some friend's house when in actual fact you're going to go and smoke boom behind the bike sheds and stay over at a friend whose parents are away, that you drink on the weekends. And then, my parents were pretty chilled about that kind of thing. They were quite well balanced. They didn't mind me partying a little bit because they knew that's what kids do, but they kept an eye on the context and the conditions under which it was done. But like, a lot of my friends had to like, on fear of death, had to lie and deceive in order to function. And so it's a normal thing, and I'm not so it's, again, I'm not saying like, everybody has to suddenly reach full enlightenment as some sort of Buddhist monk that can float off the ground and never commit any form of sin. I myself still am kind of prone to occasionally have to lie. And when I say have to, I mean, you never truly have to, unless someone's maybe got a gun to your head. But there are situations where it's necessary. Like if my license disc has expired, which it always does before I renew it because I'm just bad at being an adult, I will tell the police officer, I didn't realize it had. And sometimes they can let you off with a warning, or other times they'll give you a fine. If I oversleep, it's easier to say when I'm a few minutes late for a meeting, I'm not a person who's disrespectfully late. I'm not like, screw other people, I don't care what they think, my timeline's important and theirs aren't. But I just have bad luck with it. Like something will always happen. If I give myself extra time, something will happen and take twice as long to get to where I'm going as it's supposed to. Alternatively, if I give myself extra time, it'll be like the only day there's never any traffic and I'll be an hour early for work. But that's a tangent. The point is, like, I'll say, hey guys, like there was really bad traffic. when in actual fact, I just sort of took 15 minutes longer to get out of bed than I should have. And I won't say that unless there was traffic, because it's kind of true but not complete as a story. Because, saying to people, hey guys, I overslept again, I did it last week and 2 weeks before that, it's hard to explain that you're a person that struggles with sleep, and that you take a couple of things for your mental health, and they can make you a bit groggy, and kind of sometimes waking up feels a bit like coming out of anesthetic, because it's not a good excuse. I mean, you get up when you got to get up, which under isolation has been super weird for me, but I'll maybe touch on that just now. But there's places where, also like not wanting to hurt certain people's feelings, and I'll get into the relationships where if there's a lot of lying required, maybe it's a really bad sign in the relationships. But like, it is sometimes easier to make an excuse than to tell someone like, I actually just didn't feel anything on that date. I actually kind of like, don't like your vibe at all. And, you like, if a date doesn't go well and you want to like politely explain that you're not interested in a second one, it sometimes doesn't do anyone any good to be like, look, you reeked of garlic during the date, and it kind of put me off terribly, and now I'm not feeling the vibe anymore. You just make some polite kind of excuse. For me, is there a sense of deception and betrayal? Are you lying knowingly and strategically for your own benefit, knowing that the other person would either be hurt by the truth or would not give you something that you want from them if you were to tell them the truth, or if they were to know the real truth? There's a level of like strategic deception and betrayal. So, but even in the case of white lies, so to speak, white lies, harmless lies that are victimless, even in those cases, I've trained myself over the last 10, 15 years of thinking strongly and hard about this. And if you watched episode 0 and listened to a lot of my backstory and care about that stuff, I explained how I kind of had a few life crises, and in like 2012, 2013 realized that I just couldn't keep being fueled by anger as a driving energy. But this thing about truth came long before that. And it's such a complicated topic because the truth is such a subjective thing. So, even with the little white lies where I've got to, like, for example, if a person is begging for money at the traffic lights, the robots, as we say in South Africa, you kind of say, hey, sorry, man, I don't have anything on me. Like, I started feeling the weight of that lie all the time. And I started to feel like, if I should have something on me, I'd like to help these guys and ladies and whatever else. And I must only say that if it's true. And I should try and keep like an ashtray full of coins, since I don't use my ashtray for anything else, and start only saying I don't have anything for you, I'm really sorry, when I don't, and I am really sorry. And so even though you get to a point where now you're going to lie to a police officer, I didn't realize I was over the speed limit. No, I didn't see that the speed limit was 80. I thought it was 100. You're still aware of the fact that you're doing it. It's not just triggering on instinct, because I know people who lie on instinct. And I know that as a kid and into kind of high school, and maybe to a lesser extent through my university years and my early working years, I would confabulate stories. I would make up stories. I would outright lie for convenience. But some people, some people, it becomes their nature. And almost to a point where, when I use the term blame loosely, but to say that you can't blame them, it's like they have become that. And again, I really sort of hesitant to talk about past relationships, especially those few that were harmful to me, because you just want to kind of leave that stuff behind, and you also have a fear that the person's going to kind of find out about it and think that you paying them any more attention than they deserve. But I have dated a person who just instinctively lied. I mean, like, some of it was cold, strategic betrayal, underhanded, kind of like a plan to get away with stuff they should never have been doing, and a clear modus operandi. But other times you just lie and kind of aren't even aware of it, and sort of have to keep track of all of that kind of stuff. And that's another reason why I kind of looked into lying as being difficult, because I realized that awkwardness of when you kind of get the details wrong of a story you've told differently before, and some of the people are trying to pretend they're not kind of half irritated, half awkward about it. And life's easier when you try to tell the truth, because you don't have as much to remember. And that's why when I said Lars Ulrich saw me and went, Gordy, after I said to him, hey, you might not remember me, I've lost a lot of weight. And he went, yes, I do remember you. That little detail bothers me, because he was like, oh, yes, Captain Beer, the superhero guy, I do remember you. It's still cool, but it's not as cool as if you remembered my first name. And I know that my pal Louis, who's a big supporter of me in most of what I do and everything that I do, unless it's stupid shit, we'll be watching the podcast, and he was there with me and saw all of that happen, and he'll know that it was kind of like an exaggerated detail, not intentionally, I assure you, but that's why I feel the need to set the record straight, when in actual fact it is kind of what you would call harmless. So this person in particular that I'm thinking of, kind of, I get it. Like, they had quite scary parents who were pretty strict on them. They grew up partying too hard and doing all kinds of naughty young person stuff, just like I did. And if the parents found out, there would have been huge trouble. There always had to be kind of like a fallback backstory to explain what was going to happen. You had to have a friend who you were staying at, when in actual fact you were all going out to party, and also had a competitive sibling, similar in age, where they were kind of like so many siblings who are similar in age. It would be like they were besties, no one closer, but also no worse enemy. And if you didn't have a good story as to what you were going to go and do, which was something you wanted to do but wasn't allowed, if the sibling found out the truth and it was something that could get you in really serious trouble, they could hold that over you forever, and it would become like crushing to your life. They would either have immense power over you, which they would use for evil ongoing, or they would bust you and enjoy you getting in the most trouble you've ever been into. So this then later in life starts to develop into a kind of pattern where you get asked, like, what are you up to? And you immediately come up with something that's kind of open-ended and innocuous, because you may want to do something. You want to keep your options open. You want to make sure that you can go and do something bad or dishonest, or that your friend or family or romantic partner wouldn't approve of if the opportunity comes up. Similarly, like, you can say, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Some of the homies are going to go do something, and you like, I'm not sure if I feel like that, or, having an awesome cheat with some guy and I might want to see him. And so you create like a floating false excuse and say, I'm going to be doing that and that and that with these people. And that way, if you do decide to take up the offer, you can, on the day or the day before, say, hey guys, like, that's fallen through. Are you guys still doing the other thing? I'll come and join you. And if you either don't feel like it or something more exciting comes along, you can take it. Now, when is that kind of somebody's right to have privacy and retain control over their social life and not be under social obligation? There is that. But when it's nefarious and it's like, I've got a secret thing going on that if you found out the truth would harm you terribly, and I want to keep my options open there and be vague. But again, like, certain individuals get to a point where this just becomes habit. You future preserve your freedom by instinctively lying, and sometimes you do it when there's no benefit. Sometimes you do it when it's your knee-jerk reaction. You don't tell the truth because that requires, it's almost like, in my philosophy, always telling the truth to the best of your ability makes things simpler and easier to remember, but almost like in their philosophy, keeping things vague and open is easier and there's less to remember, because otherwise you've got to give people all the details of your life, and some of that's not going to be strategically good for you. So, with regard to doing your best to telling the truth, to tell the truth at all times, again, I'm no saint, but I really do try to do it to the point where I'm uncomfortable lying. And I always use the expression, there is none so guilty as the unaccused man who pleads innocence. It's a catch-22. The more you talk about how honest of a person you are and how non-inclined to lie you are, generally speaking, it's a very suspicious thing. Like, somebody walks into the house and you go, I didn't eat all the cookies. And they're like, what cookies? it's very sketchy. But I mean, I really do my best. I really honestly do. And so, but there's another kind of factor in it as to what is even the truth, and I'll get to that now. So keep reminding myself so that I do get to it. I read an interesting post that my friend Andrea Barnes posted on Facebook today about that there are two different types of people in terms of the way we ask for stuff. And this is not my insight or clever thinking. It was a Facebook post that she shared and obviously got from someone else, where it explained that, like some people will get asked by a friend or relative, hey, can I come and stay with you for a month because I'm kind of in between places to stay? And the people being asked will feel like it's really an awkward question. It's a rude question. And it's like, put them under pressure now to have to awkwardly say no. So now they're under pressure to create some sort of a viable excuse when the answer can simply be like, no, you've stayed here with us too many times before, or it's too much of you in too short of a space of time, or simply we just don't want to, which is a perfectly good, that's like me and my bestie Gumpy and my other bestie Clayton, and pretty much all of my besties actually. My friend Taryn, for example, would have no hesitation saying to me, hey Gord, that thing we were going to do, we just really don't feel like it, let's do it another time. And I'm like, absolutely fine, perfectly fine. I'd prefer that than a bullshit excuse. My buddy Gumpy, my buddy Clayton, my buddy Alan, my buddy Lou, all of them, me to them, no hesitation. Guys, like, I'm just not up for it. I'm tired. I'm feeling min. I'm going to sit at home and do nothing rather than like, oh no, like there was a work thing and I suddenly have to work now and blah, 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 blah. Just come straight out with it. But there are some people who, for them, saying no is a very awkward thing. And so you've got askers and guessers. And askers are people who will say, hey, can I have half of your sandwich? And be perfectly fine with being told no. Whereas a guesser will try to sort of allude to the fact that they want to kind of set up a situation where the person who they want something from can figure out that they want it. You go, oh, that looks like a great sandwich, and I wish I not even I wish I had a sandwich, but like I really love ciabatta myself, and hint until the other person offers it to them. And it's kind of like when the two different groups, the askers and the guessers, interact, they tend to find each other disingenuous or rude. Like, to put a guesser in a situation where they have to actually actively say no, they then feel like they need a good reason to say no, and it's awkward for them to have to come up with one. Whereas the guessers will kind of like feel like if a person has fished and then not been asked, that should be enough. It's a bit more complicated than all of that, but the bottom line is that when people with a different view towards what is polite and what isn't polite in terms of asking people their business interact together, you get a bit of a schism. The people who are less direct, when asked by a friend if they can come and stay, will feel like it was rude to put them under pressure to answer or have to come up with an excuse. And that's another thing. It's like, what is necessarily a lie and what is a little bit of kind of misdirection? What is a little bit of ambiguity and in a sense, manipulation? Because there is also a big difference between always telling the truth and being under pressure to give up any information to somebody that they want. Like, you don't have the right to, if I say, okay, guys, I don't lie, I'll tell the truth about whatever, you can't then go and ask me like intimate details about my sex life and be like, you have to tell the truth. I can just tell you I'm not comfortable talking about that, or it's none of your business, or I don't want to talk about that right now, or like, no, mate, I'm not getting into the details because it involves another person and their privacy and mine. I'm more than happy to tell someone, I'm not going to tell you that information, but I'm not going to lie so that I have to avoid saying that. And so you have to build up a bit of a thick skin about it. There's a clear distinction between, lying and leaving out bits of the truth. When you are doing so to manipulate, betray the trust of, or get something out of someone, it is calculated and to me not okay. When you are giving as much information as you need to in order to avoid none of your business issues or hurting someone's feelings or make your life easy so that you can do what you want, that's okay. It's different. And that's part of what this whole truth thing is so tricky about, because truth in the end, even as a concept, even if you are committed to being true to yourself, being true to other people, like it's a fluid, changing, subjective thing. People will get into a romantic situation and they'll start seeing somebody. And after a while, they'll profess their undying love to each other. I love you. I want to be with you forever. We should move in together. You're the one for me. I want to always be with you. And then they both agree. They both have that same line. Not line. They both have that same approach. And then 2 years later, one of them says to the other one, listen, I don't know how to tell you this, and I'm sorry it's going to break your heart, and I feel terrible, but I'm not into it anymore, and I want to move along. The person who's been hurt is going to often go, they're such a liar, you lied to me, like as if back when the promises were made, the person was knowingly lying about how they felt. When in actual fact, they meant every word of it at the time, and they've just either changed as a person, or the relationship has changed, or they no longer feel like that now. There's typically an inclination when people are in a relationship and it doesn't work out the way that they had intended, that the one who did the heartbreaking, the one who did the leaving, the one who was unpleasant and vain and, had a bad temper, and without being violent had a bad temper and was a bit like overly irritable, that person then becomes a psycho or a liar or a narcissist or a nutcase. When in actual fact, it's just like it didn't work out, and probably they were the one who put in less effort, or probably they were the one with the slightly sketchy moral fiber. Until you've been like systematically lied to, cheated on, and made to feel crazy about it by someone who doesn't have a proper understanding of right and wrong, whether that's in your family or in a relationship or anything like that, you realize that a person who slammed the door a couple of times isn't necessarily a psycho. A person who found themselves more attractive than they found you isn't necessarily a narcissist. Similarly, like a person who made you promises and then didn't deliver it on it is not necessarily a pathological liar. Because once you've had a psycho or a narcissist or a pathological liar, you realize it's deep. It's a much deeper hurt and a much deeper problem. But also there's a degree with that kind of thing of like, you're so screwed up, it's kind of not your fault. Like, if you take personally the horrible things that a narcissistic, pathological liar can do to you and how it can make you feel, you'll go crazy. You'll feel like someone who you loved and who was meant to love you went out of your way to rip your heart out in the worst way they could think of. And it's like murder, but worse, because at least murder stops hurting after a while. But then you go, okay, but like this person almost did it to themselves as well. They almost let themselves down over and over and over again to the point where they screwed up their own life. Like at least if, two people's lives get screwed up and one person did it, you as the so-called victim, or I hate that concept and word, don't have to live with the fact that you did it. You didn't break this beautiful thing. If you were to break it yourself and then also be without it and miss it and think that was like a really sad outcome, but you did it and you have no one to blame but yourself, it becomes a little bit harder. But now the truth being subjective and the truth being a hard thing to understand, like you get asked on any given day, like, what do you want? What do you want from life? Touched on this a lot in the last 2 episodes, this idea that we know what we don't like about our jobs and our lives and our social situation, but we don't know what we'd rather have. That's a kind of truth. Like the truth is, I don't like my job and what I'm doing, and I'm underpaid and I'm feeling like life's a treadmill towards death. But okay, cool. What do you want to do? The truth is, I don't know. And then you might get an idea in your head, oh, that's something I'd love to look into. And say, I'm going to be a cartoonist because I can draw a bit. And then you dedicate yourself to it. You start doing it for a while and you realize once this becomes work, you actually hate it. Were you lying before? No, it was just the best possible information that you had at your disposal. And I mean, even in terms of biology, human beings' memory and human beings' ability to perceive the information around them is incredibly limited. Like, I don't want to lie and get the numbers wrong and make up the numbers, but I have heard a lot of I've encountered scientifically based information many times throughout my life about how human memory is so fallible, about how, in Dan Ariely's irrational series of books, Predictably Irrational, The Upside of Irrationality, and a couple of others, he talks about also like the experiments that people undertake at varsities and stuff to figure out like how accurate recall is. a bunch of people will experience the same phenomenon and it will be documented what actually happened. But then 5 years later, when they all get asked to give the most honest account as possible, the variations are massive. What colors were the wall? What color was the car? What kind of roof did the house have? How was did the people have dogs or not? Some people will say no dogs. Another person will say there was a cat. Another person will say there was 3 dogs. And even on a lie detector test, people come up with honest but inaccurate answers about what actually happened. Similarly, with our ability to take in information, we as human beings cannot process the amount of data that our eyes and ears and sensory organs can take in. I also read somewhere in a reliable book that why haven't, from an evolutionary perspective, not that evolution starts with a plan and then moves toward that plan. That's a common misconception about evolution. But even just from the perspective of design, why don't we just have many eyes around our head and we can see a 360-degree picture of everything? And from a biological reason, it's because in order to have that much of the part of the brain that processes vision and that much of the part of the brain that can then consciously process that information, we would need some bizarrely enormous head, for which we would then need some bizarrely massive body to support it, which would then require a huge amount of oxygen intake and food intake, and you would just become an impractical creature that can't take in as much fuel as you need to, as fast as you can spend it. And so when you, for example, driving, your brain goes into a situation where it blocks out a lot of what's in your peripheral vision. You're able to focus on more or less one thing, maybe 2 or 3 things at a push at a time. The car in front of you, the thing you're listening to on be it a radio news report or an audio book or a podcast, and your brain blocks out the driveways you're driving past, the trees and the squirrels. If you're in Cape Town, for example, there were people walking down the side of the road. If you got asked, you ever drive and you get to the end of the journey and you don't remember the journey happening at all. You can hardly remember anything from the drive because your brain has deliberately protected you from all of that extra information that is not considered important or unusual. And your brain is programmed to then detect any sudden change or any irregularity and focus a lot of attention on it suddenly as a kind of protection mechanism. So as soon as something might be a threat or anything moves in the corner of your peripheral vision, it's the same way you can be chilling in the house at night and you hear something somewhere and you're suddenly hyper aware of it. Meanwhile, you couldn't have, if someone for $1 trillion asked you, played you 4 bird noises and said which was the most recent bird that tweeted in your garden that you could hear, you'd never be able to answer that question. So your brain is designed to funnel and filter the amount of information that you take in. And also perspective plays a role. Your brain is constantly computing what is your best guess. So I'm going to do an entire episode on the thinking mind versus the actual conscious reality, and it'll get a bit hippie-ish and a bit spiritual, but I'll also get into some of the Western aspects of it, in that the narration in your brain, which many people take to be their actual mind. They take it to be their opinion. They take it to be what they really believe. You'll be driving and 2 cars will be it'll be 2 lanes and 2 cars will be going next to each other and they're going at the same speed and you can't get past them. And you will, in your mind, create a guess story that these 2 people not only are aware of each other, but are deliberately driving as slowly as possible and at the same speed to piss you off and prevent you from getting where you're going. And you'll believe that. You'll have that offended feeling like, screw you guys, you deliberate. They're not even aware of you or of each other. And you probably 1,000,000 times have been driving at the same speed as the car beside you and totally unaware of them. And some person stuck right behind you wants to pass and you just were doing your life and you didn't care. Your thinking mind is a constant series of guesses that's designed to best help you navigate the information that you do have and interpolate or fill in the gaps with the information that you don't have, because you can never have all the information at once. And if you were able to take in all the information at once, it would collapse your brain. So, for example, with that in mind, if there's a 4-way traffic crossing and there's an accident, and the cars crash into each other, and there's witnesses from various different angles, and they all give their account, and there's a dispute. The one driver thinks it's your fault and the other driver thinks it's the other guy's fault. And they're fighting over whose fault it was and whose right of way it was and who got to the line first so that it was their chance to go. And like, I'm a big football fan. I'm a big soccer fan, Manchester United supporter. All hail King Eric over there. Sorry if that just lost me a whole bunch of followers. It is what it is. But there are many situations where you're looking at a replay in a football match of whether an attacking move was offside or whether there was contact for a foul and should be a card or a penalty or not, or a red card. And even with a HD full detail, 100% accurate replay of a recording of exactly what happened, you'll see it from one angle and go, clear foul, absolutely a foul. No one in their right mind can argue that that dude slid in, took the feet out of the other guy. It should be a penalty and probably a yellow card. And everyone will agree. But then they show it from a different angle, and you see that from that angle, you can clearly see a bit of space in between the sliding foot and the attacker who jumped up and actually faked the fall. And you go, oh, with this information, actually, definitely not a penalty or a free kick. The ball, it can look offside if you look at it from one angle, and then from another angle, you can see that the point of contact with the ball is different. Don't want to bore anybody who doesn't care about soccer with a soccer metaphor, but very much can a second or third angle of the replay completely change the outcome of what the decision was. And if you only had the one angle that at first that showed it as almost certainly a definite foul, 99.9% of people would have agreed it's a foul and been happy with that result. But when the evidence comes up of the second angle and you go, oh, right, now you can see better from this angle, everybody is happy to change their mind. But if there was only one angle available, would everybody that incorrectly based their best guess on the information at hand been a liar? No. Like, you're taking in what information you've got, and your chattery thinking mind, which is not you, it's talking to you, more on this in another episode, is doing its best guess. So now you're like even living in a reality where your reality is largely a guess. On top of that, when you being asked to give your feelings, what do you want? What do you think? What can you promise? What do you love? What's your worst? What's your best? What's your opinion? You're not even 100% sure about that, but we have the need as people to be sure, to be firm to make firm statements and firm beliefs. This is why people on Facebook will fight to the death about something they don't know anything about. They won't have any idea where they got it in their head that the earth is flat. Terrible example, because I think most people can agree flat earthers are generally fringe lunatics, but like anti-vax, and unfollow me all you want, is largely equally scientifically unfounded. But someone hears it somewhere from a source that they like, and the next time it comes up in a conversation, they need to have an opinion and can't just say, hey, I'm not an expert on that, I don't know anything about it. And then whatever opinion they've defended, they'll defend to the death, and then because they've defended that opinion to the death once, it now becomes even more ingrained and something that they're even more inclined to defend. Like, if you ask people a lot of the time some belief they hold, especially if it's inaccurate about a scientific thing or a political thing, and you ask them, where did you find that out? They'll either post a link to someone else's blog or video where no one knows where that person found out their opinion, or they'll not be able to answer the question and come up with some other reason why certain other credible sources or people agree with them, therefore it's right. But like, where did you get it in your head that, airplanes create chemtrails? Because chemtrails, also more accurately known as contrails, can be very easily explained. Why cloudy stripes come out the back of a plane in a non-conspiracy way that, with a little bit of basic scientific understanding of clouds, condensation, and air pressure, you can fully understand and go, yeah, that makes absolute sense. I have to know a few things first for it to make absolute sense, but it absolutely does. Similarly, an airplane couldn't carry enough poisonous gas to spray it out at that level if it was being squirted out of the wings. The wings couldn't contain that much fluid. And also, the most useless and ineffective way to poison the entire world is to pump it out of airplane wings, one commercial airliner flight at a time. You'd be much better off being the Illuminati, building a giant factory somewhere in a closed off area where people can't access and pumping your chemicals into the atmosphere from the ground. But that's going off on a bit of a tangent about why chemtrail conspiracies are dumb. The point is, people get that idea in their head not from a scientific source, because all of the scientific sources, the real credible ones that are peer-reviewed by other scientists, all agree it's bullshit. But you don't know where you've got it. You just, I believe this. This is the truth. And when you're fighting to the death over your misinformation or over your correct opinion in the argument, you are telling the truth. The anti-vaxxer that believes that, vaccines cause autism, which is a terrible thing to happen to a kid and whatever, they are telling the truth when they tell you they're right. But they have somewhere along the line misunderstood correlation for causation. And, like all dictators drink water, therefore water causes dictators. Like, conditions in children happen, always have, sadly always will. And because the majority of children in more privileged societies have access to vaccines, most kids who get an issue will have had a vaccine. But that doesn't mean the vaccine causes the issue. And they don't take into account the fact that 99.9998% of people are fine. And that there could be a million other causes. But when you become invested in your opinion and you become invested in the issue, it's not only how much you believe the details, it's how some psychological investment, some psychological loss, if you were to be proven wrong or had to admit that you were wrong, it would somehow devalue you. It would somehow affect your credibility and your worth. And you're more defending against that than you are defending the actual point of view that you've got. Which is why I also mentioned in a previous episode that when you want to discuss with somebody that maybe they should rethink their opinion or rethink their information, to do so in a welcoming way. Twitter lynching someone because you didn't like their adjective, only going to make them more inclined to disagree with you, more defensive, more attached to their opinion, because no one's ever had their mind changed by being told, you're a demon and a redneck and a Nazi, and now I'm going to tell you why. You got to have a discussion and say, listen, I know how you feel. I can see how you see it like this, but maybe here's some things to consider. And then people, when not threatened and not humiliated and not with the risk of being a clown, suddenly have a lot less to defend with their swords. Also, intersubjective reality is another factor of the truth. So intersubjective reality is a concept that says that when enough people agree on a point or a point of existence, it becomes true. And it becomes true not in the empirical, scientifically measurable sense, but true in the sense that people who believe it can apply it to their life, can live as if this thing is real. In the time of the Roman Catholic Church, there was no questioning that doctrine. And when I say the time of the church, it's still unfortunately for a lot of children the time of the church, but the Roman Catholic Church in particular. But I mean, when they were the political power that covered the majority of the world and the majority of people in the world, it wasn't, we need to persuade you of this, you need to believe it, and here's a lot of pressure to believe it. You believed it. From birth, that was reality. There were all the different levels of hell and purgatory and the different angels and the different rules, and they were part of your life. Similarly, in more ancient religions and kind of people who lived closer to earth and whatever had a lot of goddesses and gods and all of that. And a lot of people romanticize those lifestyles, and that's fine. I'm not here to discuss that at this stage. But, the fact that, hello, Blackie Chan, you need to not do me a podcast. Tell the people hello. Do a hello. Okay. The tree was alive. It had an opinion. The sun was the god that created everything. The rain came depending on how many people you needed to sacrifice at the altar this year. All of that was real. It was real. It wasn't like someone's going, I don't know about this. And another great example of intersubjective reality is corporations and countries, right? The United States of America can nuclear bomb another country. It can invade another country. It can send men and women to die. Men and women can be killed. It can allow or disallow immigration from other countries. It can buy Greenland and make that, or Hawaii or Alaska, and make them states of it. And it can own things, and it can make laws, and everybody agrees that it's a real thing. The states America is a bad example because America is quite politicized. I'm talking about countries in general. Brazil is a real thing. It's got languages, people inside it, laws, foreign policy, brochures for tourism, and they can compete at global soccer. But like Brazil is really imaginary drawings on the ground as to where one country starts and another country ends. It isn't real. There's no reason that it couldn't have had a different name, that half of one country could have formed the other half of that country, and the lines could have been drawn differently. And this intersubjective thing that exists because we all agree it does is real. You can't argue there is no United States of America. It is a very real thing, but it's only real because intersubjectively everyone agrees that it is. And the same can be said for corporations like McDonald's. McDonald's can own land, it can make food, it can own farms, it can employ people, it can fire people, it can affect policy and politics by backing candidates. It can do stuff. And you say, okay, well, no, McDonald's is a thing because it's kind of like it's a board of directors and it's a whole bunch of workers. But every single one of those people that make up the company, individually, or even, it would be a logistical nightmare, but even collectively could be replaced, and McDonald's would still be McDonald's. But it isn't actually real. McDonald's can own stuff. It can buy your property. It can, it can sue you and take away all your things. But we all just agree McDonald's is real. And as long as we do agree McDonald's is real, it's able to make burgers. So that's intersubjective reality. Like, is it true? Yes. Is it not true? Also yes. So, ask me what I want. I'll tell you the truth. Right now I'm pretty full because I had lunch, but I'll use an example. I want popcorn, and that's the truth. And ask me what I want after I've had the popcorn, and I'll say to not feel so full with my fat ass from overeating popcorn. We have to be, for me, being committed to telling the truth whenever I can, in as much as I can, makes my life easier. And so the last point I want to make, because it's one of the most important ones and it's taken me a long time to get to, and I still need to get to epic story time, is the idea that, give me a second here, I'm completely losing my train of thought. Yes, your relationships. Okay, so sometimes you've got to lie to the people close to you. Sometimes you're in a family situation where you can't take care of yourself, you can't be without your family, and they will never accept you if you come out of the closet. That is terribly tragic, it's heartbreaking, and it's awful. And you have to lie to look after yourself. You've got to lie to get by. You can't be thrown out on the road and beaten up by your alcoholic, asshole, homophobic father. And he has got reasons for being the way he is, and so on and so forth. But then clearly it's going, okay, you're lying because of a big flaw in your relationship, and you know where that flaw is. It's with the people whose heads and hearts are decaying in the past. But when you in more elective situations, in more voluntary situations, and you have to lie to your boyfriend or girlfriend, you have to hide something that you're doing, you can't possibly tell your family the truth about X, Y, and Z. If my mom, I spoke earlier about how I won't offer, my privacy is my privacy, but I won't go to my mom and tell her about some of the more insane stuff that I've done in my party life in the past, and mistakes I've made, and times when my behavior was bad and unhealthy and stuff. And say, hey, mom, guess what? I once did this and this and this, and did that illegal thing, and just to get it off my chest. But if she asked me, I would tell her. You know what I mean? Unless it was impinging on someone else's privacy, I would tell her. And my mom may well be watching this. So hello, mommy. You're very lovely, and I love you. I'm sorry for all of the difficulties I caused you as a hard to manage young man, and I've done many stupid, often illegal things in my life. And here I am. So, I would tell my mom. And my relationship is good because of that. If there was a reason I cannot tell my mom, it implies that something between our relationship is not 100% healthy. And it is a similar one to like very early on in the chat, I spoke about how, sometimes you got to lie to the traffic officer. Sometimes you got to lie to the family to avoid hurting the conservative auntie's feelings. Because what's the point of trying to change her now? For the peace, for the greater good, sometimes you got to not. It's not like in every situation in a friendship or a relationship or a work situation or family. It's a horrible indictment of your shitty relationship if anything has to be kind of kept secret or hidden from the other person or skirted around or avoided or lightly lied about. But if there is a situation where the people close to you won't tolerate something you're doing, if they find out the truth, it either indicates you shouldn't be doing it or that you need to work on your relationship with them or that they've got some kind of issue they need to work on. So what is the truth? The truth is we don't know the truth. The truth is I've got a tattoo here, says truth. It's like a heart nailed to my sleeve. Hasn't aged that well. I actually need to get the color put back into that one. But, the truth is important to me. But at the same time, if you asked me what my truth was about what I believed about certain things politically, religiously, or I prefer spiritually, I have such a different belief structure now than I did 10 years ago when I was 28. And some things that have stayed with me forever, friendships, moral beliefs, opinions, tastes, and some things where I'm just like, either what on earth was I thinking, or where my opinion and my belief is totally the opposite today. So it evolves and it changes. And what you want, though, I believe, is to be doing your best to be as in touch with what is the truth as possible. I really hate the social media bullshit expression, your truth. Truth in its actual definition, in its semantic form, is a finite thing. I hate it when people, and this is a little idiosyncrasy of me. I don't hold it against people as if they're doing anything wrong. It's just a weird pet hate of mine, is when people say so true when something's true. It's like, no, a thing is either true or it's not true. There's no varying degrees of true. You're either pregnant or not pregnant. There's no more or less pregnant. Accuracy is a thing that varies in degrees. So accurate-ish, not at all accurate. Relatable is a thing that varies in degree, but so true is not so true. And I hate the expression live your truth, because like your truth is not up for you. It's not up to you to decide what the truth is, the intersubjective global truth, but your own acting on what you believe to be true is a flawed system. But one where the more you try and understand what you really think, what do I really feel? You get really pissed off because the boyfriend didn't do a thing, but actually if you really thought about it, you'd be pissed off because of something else in your relationship that's ongoing. And this is a little trigger that you're looking for to take out on them. We all do this. We've all had this done to us. Like, are you really a terrible person who needs to be treated shittily because you didn't pack the dishwasher the right way again? Or is there a difficult issue in your relationship that maybe neither of you are even consciously thinking of, or to keep the peace that you don't bring up, which is now sort of being projected onto a tiny little problem? What is the truth? I'm so pissed off. I keep telling him how to pack this dishwasher and he keeps doing it differently. You don't care about that, actually. You just feel like you're not acknowledged. He doesn't listen to you and he doesn't value your feelings when your feelings are important to you. So yeah, that is my broad, I could go on forever and nobody wants that. That is my broad understanding and opinion on what the truth means to me, and my ongoing quest to try and understand it, and my beliefs around how it should be applied, and some of the ways that my views on it has changed over time. So now, without further ado, not to be confused with the French greeting adieu, for those of you who use the expression incorrectly sometimes. Without further ado, it's time for epic story time. Epic story time. Cue cool graphic. Thanks, Josh. Right. Epic story time, where true stories sometimes changed with the names and places changed to protect the guilty. In this particular case is one where I have to change the names to protect the guilty. It's the time that the one time I got nervous performing musically, I get nervous sometimes when I do weddings. I tend to marry friends of mine. I've done, I think, 5 or 6 weddings now. And then I get nervous because if I screw up that performance, it's not just something of mine that's screwed up. I don't just embarrass myself. I like ruin something really important to someone else. But jumping up on stage and performing makes me nervous. It doesn't make me nervous, rather, except for when I've had my Calamari spiked and am starting to feel a large quantity of Molly come on in my system as I'm supposed to perform at 4 a.m. to a giant crowd at a giant rave. So one of my dearest friends and best musical collaborators, we're going to call him DJ Monte Carlo because that's not his name, and I have played a lot of sets on drum and bass together as a performing duo. And so this particular show was one of the bigger trance festivals in Cape Town. It's about an hour and a half outside of Cape Town. And Monte has asked me not to mention what it is, but I don't know how that makes a difference. But anyway, I will respect his wishes. And one of my really awesome ex-girlfriends, a fantastic girl that I dated for several years, and a lot of that while I was living in Cape Town, she, like a total champion, decided to volunteered to drive the 2 of us and 1 or 2 of our friends who were attending to this jol, drop us off at like 10 p.m. And then fetch us in the morning. So we would like overnight jol and play the show. And one of the funniest things that's ever happened was that a truck was... In Cape Town, there is a transportation company called DJ Bosman Transport. And so Bosman is a South African surname. Directly translated, it means bushman. Bushman can be seen as a derogatory term for the indigenous South Africans known as the Khoisan, one of the earliest, if not the earliest, human populations. But it's also like, it's not really okay. It's like the word Eskimo. It's not really okay to call a Khoisan a bushman, but it's also, not like hate speech you can be jailed for. It's in that gray area. But as a surname, Bosman's a very common surname. And there's obviously a dude his initials are DJ, who's got a company called DJ Bosman Transport. And they have massive, massive trucks. You'll see them if you do long distance drives in South Africa, and especially in the Cape. You see these trucks quite often. But we were getting a little bit loose, starting to jol, and halfway to this party, we got stuck behind a giant 18-wheeler truck of DJ Bosman Transport, and we said something along the lines of like, see, DJ Bosman Transport is coming in with a lot of gear, and you had to be there. But it was just when you laugh so hysterically you think you're going to die, when your mouth is just wide open and you've got a look of terror on your face and your body is just vibrating, and every now and again you go and then you go back to just howling silently while you're concerned your heart might stop. It was just one of the funniest things that ever happened. So anyway, we go to this party and we're performing in the 4 a.m. slot. We are the last act playing, me and Monte. And we are playing on a drum and bass floor at a trance festival where most of the floors are trance. And we're on one of the smaller stages. And there were some big name artists, 1 international and 2 of South Africa's biggest artists playing before us. Closing at a drum and bass show is kind of a bit like opening. It's not the most glamorous set. And me and Monte would often have to close shows because our style was harder. I play a little bit more accessible, slightly more jump up stuff mostly these days, but back then we fancied ourselves pretty hardcore and we were like the metal of drum and bass. And I don't like to perform when I'm terribly inebriated. A couple of drinks is good. Too many is bad. No smoking weed, even though I don't do that because it's not good for me. No like mind-altering drugs. And me and Monte had once played before at a show many years prior in a salt pan somewhere near Hartbeespoort, where he had taken a little bit of a something just before we played and ended up not being able to play properly. And I, as the MC/rapper, if the DJ is out, it doesn't matter how hard you try, it doesn't matter how good you are on the night, you will be out of time if you're rapping and suddenly the beat goes out. So we agreed we would never do that again. If we were going to party, if we were going to get mind-altering stuff going, we would play our set first, and we always did. And then on this particular year, we got there at 10, 11 p.m. and had to kind of keep ourselves occupied and slowly but surely have a few drinks to stay kind of on a buzz, but not have so many that you get completely hammered, but also not completely stop drinking so that you get that post-drinking kind of sleepiness and not enthusiastic to play a show. So it was a long sort of 5 hours of trying to kind of slowly drink beer and wait to play while a whole bunch of really great artists came up to play. And at festivals and rock shows and stuff, you always have those mobile caravan things where food is sold. And in Cape Town, Mr. Calamari is a vibe. As the name suggests, Mr. Calamari peddles calamari. And it's very good, actually. Like, you wouldn't think calamari out of a takeaway caravan's a good idea, but, it's fresh in Cape Town, at least I hope it is, and it's bloody delicious. Get some chips and some calamari. And so come about an hour before the show, finally it's like 2:30 or 3 a.m. and we're like almost up next. I'm like, cool, I want to go and get a couple of beers for the stage, and I want to get something to eat quickly because I'm kind of hungry, and get it in so that I don't eat just before I go on stage. And bearing in mind that me and Monte Carlo have a pact that we never get too bent out of shape before we play, I'm eating my calamari, and he looks at me with this mischievous face and goes like, "Hey bro, how's your calamari?" And I'm like, it's great, thanks. Like, is it great? And I'm like, it's delicious. Like, thank you for asking. It's fried calamari out of a polystyrene tub. And he looks at me with this knowing look. And then about 10, 15 minutes before it's time to play, and I've been waiting the whole night, I start feeling like, okay, something is different. I'm feeling something coming on. And I suddenly realized, like, I put two and two together and go, dude, what did you do to my calamari? And he's like, are you feeling something? And I'm like, yes. What did you do to my calamari? And he's like, oh, I just put a MDMA in it. And I was like, dude, like, no, like, I can't play if I'm out of my mind, like, how can you? I wasn't unbelievably offended given the relationship we have and the stage of my life I was in, that I had ingested drugs. It was more the fact that it was before we were supposed to play, and it was like done as a deception. So you need to, never spike anyone's anything. Don't do drugs in general, and certainly never spike someone's drink or food with drugs. But at the same time, like, we had a relationship where it's forgivable, but it was the timing more than the action, because now I had to play a show. And at a trance festival at 4 a.m., the people are what I call walkers. They're like zombies from The Walking Dead, and they just walk like this, and whichever dance floor starts up and is louder, they gravitate that way towards those speakers. And, we started to kick in our set, and I'm suddenly on the stage holding the microphone, looking at this sea of literal zombies who are just not even dancing. They're like this. And I become absolutely bloody terrified. And I'm like, yo, everyone, what's up? Thankfully, the zombies are not aware of anything except their own inner universe. And it was really traumatic. And then ultimately, I got it in my head that I had a wireless mic, that if I went into the audience and performed among the audience, it would feel inclusive and full of love and all those Molly feelings, which it did. I have no doubt I was appalling and that hardly anything I said rhymed at all, never mind rhymed well. But I went into the audience and started rapping, and I'll never forget the way that certain zombies would look at me in the middle of the set and like notice that the words coming out the speakers were coming out of the guy, a real person, a live performer who's not only real but is standing next to them. And that suddenly somehow made the audience less terrifying, going and performing in the audience. But I've always wanted to tell that story because Monte Carlo deserves to be punished, and I will never ever let it slide or let it go. And definitely would never intentionally take Molly and then perform at a show. But I can tell you from having done it, it's a cuck time. Don't do it. If you desperately need to take Molly, no judges, do it after your performance. Anyway, homies, thank you so much once again for taking the time. I hope that you got something out of this. If you didn't agree or whatever, there's no need to fight about it, but you're welcome to drop a comment or just, not watch future episodes. And those of you who want to chat or discuss or anything, please do so in the comments. Please give it a like. And I just want to thank once again everyone that has been supporting this channel so far. It means a great deal to me. I hope you guys are staying safe and staying sane and isolating well. And I will see you again soon. This has been Trying Harder with Gord Laws, and you guys are the best.
And I suggest you quit your job.